So think about this for a second. For almost 50 years, the world's two biggest superpowers had enough firepower to literally end human civilization. And yet, they never actually went to war with each other. It's the ultimate paradox, right? And that's what we're getting into today. The absolutely terrifying logic that prevented an apocalypse by, well, keeping one just around the corner.
You know, the atomic age didn't really begin with a huge bang, but more with the kind of stunned silence that comes after. In 1945, the rulebook for global power got completely torn up and rewritten in a single instant. The world was suddenly, and frighteningly, brand new.
For this one brief, kind of wild moment in history, a single country had a complete monopoly on total destruction. The United States was all alone with the atomic bomb. That's a kind of power no one had ever seen before, and it created this brand new, deeply uncertain world.
So here's the central puzzle we're looking at. The very same weapon that seemed to guarantee victory in any fight somehow created a world where winning a big global war was suddenly impossible. How on earth does a tool of absolute power lead to an absolute stalemate?
Well, the answer starts to unfold in a place you might not expect. We're not on a battlefield. We're on this remote little chain of islands, way out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. This is where the US went to really try and figure out what its new arsenal could do.
So between 1946 and 1958, the paradise of Bikini Atoll was basically turned into a laboratory for Armageddon. The US set off dozens of nuclear bombs there, thinking they were just running some contained experiments to see how powerful these things were. Turns out they were very, very wrong.
But you know how it is with science, right? A lot of the time, the biggest discoveries are the ones you weren't even looking for. While they were busy studying the massive, visible force of these weapons, the scientists stumbled onto a threat that was completely invisible and way more sinister.
And that threat was radioactive fallout. See, this wasn't just dust from the explosion. No, this was an invisible, lethal poison. It was a part of the bomb's aftermath that could just silently travel on the wind for thousands and thousands of miles, long after the bright flash and the loud boom were gone.
And this was the new, terrifying reality. The danger couldn't be contained. This fallout, from tests in the super-remote Pacific, was actually being detected thousands of miles away, right on the US mainland. It turns out the ultimate weapon has absolutely no respect for borders. So, this discovery? It changed everything. The secret was out. Not just that the bomb existed, but that it had these lingering, invisible dangers. The era of America's nuclear monopoly was slamming shut, and a new, much more dangerous competition was about to kick off.
I mean, just look at how quickly this all spiraled. In 1949, that's only 4 years after the US had the bomb to itself, the Soviets set off their own. And just like that, there were 2 nuclear powers. Then, by the late 1950s, the whole game changed again with ICBMs. These are missiles that could cross the entire globe in about 30 minutes. Defense was basically impossible. Nowhere was safe anymore. The standoff was now total.
Okay, so the chessboard is set. The players now had to write a completely new rulebook. This wasn't your grandfather's kind of warfare. This was something totally different, and it was governed by a cold, mathematical, and, let's be honest, an insane-sounding logic.
So first, you have the arms race. This was the engine driving this whole conflict. And the idea behind it was pretty simple. If my enemy builds one bomb, well, I've got to build 2. If they build a bigger bomb, I need to build an even bigger one. It was just this relentless cycle of one-upmanship where the stakes were, the entire planet.
And this led directly to something called brinksmanship. Imagine 2 drivers just speeding towards each other in a game of chicken. That's basically Cold War politics. You push a crisis right to the very edge of nuclear war, and you bet that the other guy is going to get scared and swerve first. It's an unbelievably dangerous game to play when one tiny miscalculation means global annihilation. So all of this leads to one single, chilling conclusion: mutually assured destruction, or, as it was called, MAD. And the logic, believe it or not, is pretty simple. A surprise first strike sounds tempting, but it only works if you can knock out all of your enemy's weapons at once. But now, with ICBMs hidden in concrete silos and nuclear subs hiding in the deep ocean, that became impossible. Each side was guaranteed to be able to strike back, and that meant starting a nuclear war was no longer really an act of war. It was an act of suicide.
This quote just perfectly captures that terrifying paradox, right? It's like a game of chess, a global standoff, where the only way to actually win is to just not make a move at all.
But this whole high-stakes global strategy wasn't just for generals and presidents. Oh no, the shadow of that atomic cloud hung over everyday life. It created this constant, low-level hum of anxiety for millions and millions of ordinary people.
So when you're faced with this unimaginable, invisible threat that could just show up without any warning, you have a very basic, very human question. In a world of mutually assured destruction, what could a regular person possibly do to keep their family safe?
The official answer? It seemed almost absurdly simple. Duck and cover. Yeah. All across the country, kids in school were taught that at the first sign of a nuclear flash, you hide under your desk. This, plus the whole trend of building fallout shelters in your backyard, became this huge cultural thing. It was a ritual that gave people a sense of control when faced with something completely uncontrollable, even if its actual effectiveness was, well, let's just say it was highly questionable.
And that kind of leaves us with this big, lingering question for today. The Cold War is over, but the weapons? They're still here. And now they're in the hands of more countries than ever before. So was the logic of MAD just a product of its time? Or is it still the silent, terrifying logic that's keeping our world from the brink?